Oh my goodness. Setting up. I got it. It's coming. It's coming. Still setting up and zooming. Bam. All right, here you go.
Okay, it's my turn.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I
Portia,
move,
I'm sorry, Portia, did you hit record?
Did I hit record? Record two. Okay. Record. Record is, yep, there you go.
okay.
All right.
Been zooming.
I move that we call this
Bam. All right, here you go.
no. Okay, it's my
Okay,
turn.
sorry, I had to mute myself.
Yeah.
All right. I move that we
Hit
call
record.
this meeting to order.
Record two. Okay. Record.
I second.
All right. So because we are online, we're going to need to go ahead and do a roll call. So the motion is to move the meeting to order at 8:40 a.m. I will call each trustee's name and just if you can do an aye or nay. Brandon Frazier,
Aye.
Shannon Smith. I think Shannon, you're on mute, but
Sorry about it. Aye. Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
and Sean.
Aye.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and move this meeting to order. On our agenda today, we have the approval of the minutes and then a leadership update and some quick committee updates. The bulk of the meeting, we wanted to discuss really the current federal situation and how it's impacting Perry Street. So the first item on our agenda is to approve the January minutes. Is there a motion to approve the January minutes?
I move to approve the January minutes.
All right, Andrew moved. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Sean. That's a second. I'm just going to repeat your names because it is easier for us when we review the transcript for minutes to pick up on names. So forgive me for being repetitive there. Again, I'm going to just do a roll call vote. Brandon,
Aye.
Shannon,
Aye. Sorry, didn't mute.
and that's okay. Andrew,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
and Sean.
Aye.
All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Rachel to talk about all the exciting things that have been happening at the school.
Sorry, I was on mute. Hi, guys. Okay, so actually the last 30 days have been super exciting. Last week, Anthony Anderson, the actor from Blackish, came to the school for a morning and talked. I'm sorry, was that last week or the week before last? Anyway, last week he came to the school for a morning and talked to the kids about their goals, their aspirations. They all took pictures, autographs. It was a really fun morning. The kids got to watch an episode of Blackish right before he came, although all the kids knew he was anyway, but they were super excited. So that was a huge highlight of our month. Also, Tie Tuesday. So we had visitors come into the building, plus our two assistant principals. They put on Tie Tuesday where all the kids in middle school learned how to tie a tie, which we thought was necessary and fun for the kids to learn how to tie ties. We didn't realize how excited they would be to do it. Even the next day, they came back with their ties on. They want to show everyone they knew how to tie their tie. It was a really awesome event that we had. So much so that now we have to do a high tea party for the girls because they said we didn't do anything for them. So now our counselor and our ELA sixth grade ELA teacher are planning a tea where we're going to invite a bunch of different women speakers in to speak to the kids at like a brunch. And the kids have to get dressed up. We're gonna, and all the adults who are coming are gonna be dressed up. It's gonna be like a super fancy event. And that's coming soon to match our tie event. Honor Roll breakfast was a hit. We had so many kids who receive awards for the honor roll, and so many kids who did such a great job on their report cards last semester. We highlighted them with the breakfast, certificates, and they got to go to the dance room and just hang out and eat with their friends. Oh, and also the last thing we're having visitors come in frequently now to talk to the kids, to mentor members from Kappa Alpha Psi, DC chapter. Undergrads are now coming to the school mentoring the kids. And we had Meet the Violence here yesterday to talk to our sixth grade boys. There were gentlemen that are in the community, leaders in the community who are now promoting they're going around with a nonviolence campaign. So they came in yesterday to speak to our students, which was also really good for them. Other than that, we're trucking along. We're taking MAP next week. So we are right now in the process of preparing for that. We have been pulling students in small groups. We have been rearranging groups and figuring out what's what. So when we do take MAP, that we are prepared. So the next board meeting, I believe, I will have MAP data for you to review. We are expecting that the kids do a great job. The teachers have been working so hard. And we're hoping that all the students meet their growth goal on the MAP test coming forward. That is it for the leadership update and what's happening at Perry Street right now.
All right, thank you. Okay, I'm up. Mid-year data. So just to give you an update, attendance still continues to be a small challenge for some of the families. While like truancy has declined, we're still seeing chronic absenteeism. But we are working on different efforts. Like when we meet as an attendance committee, we really do sit there and analyze that data to understand and look directly at which kid is truant or chronically absent, to try and determine like a plan for them and figure out how we're able to support them. It is a little bit harder with like the amount of students that we have, but we are working like really closely on figuring this out. One of the things that we've done to be able to track attendance is a little better is if you've come to the building, you've seen that we've had the iPads for the Raptor attendance. So it's able to track a little bit. The data is more it's more direct. So it's less hands involved, where the student comes in. If they're late, they're able to come in and sign in themselves. And then in their Power School Sys, it stamps exactly what time they arrive. And then the same thing for when they're leaving early for the day. We're able to kind of see like the frequent flyers who are coming in the latest, who are leaving early every single day, to try and do some outreach to them. Another thing that just started was some of the APs and Cole. They're doing an attendance March Madness, which is really, really fun. It's so basically every single week they put a bracket up on the wall and see how many teachers have taken attendance, to see like our students who are actually like coming. And they walk around with some music at the end of the week for the winners, with a little cart with treats on it. And it's really fun. So a lot of people are engaging in that. So as we meet, we're kind of trying to figure out more and more things that we can do to kind of get them to come. But as you can see, the data is the data, unfortunately. So we're definitely working hard to figure out how to get our friends in the seats every single day, because we know it's critical and it's important. And then for operations and finance, I know this is definitely, as Crouch calls, the pink elephant in the room. As we know right now, everything is happening with the finances. Right now, the federal government is working to cut the Department of Education and our grants. And then, a lot of the tariffs that are happening are definitely going to increase costs for us, which means an impact to our budget. And then local funding is also uncertain, which means that we're working to figure out if we're actually going to get the 2.74 increase in the payments that we're supposed to get for our student funding. The instability does make it hard for our long-term planning. So when we're sitting in the budget meetings trying to figure out what next year is going to look like, when new news reports come out, it kind of like halts and redirects where we are. However, with that being said, we do have a rainy day fund. So we do have our cash on hand, which is something that we're gonna work hard not to touch because we like to have that on hand, like you like to have a little bit of rainy day fund in your bank. But we're also gonna discuss with the bank a possibility of paying our bond off early so we can have additional cash if necessary. We're gonna have to defer some of our building investments, which breaks my heart because I'm coming in here to try and make this building better. And then, we're definitely gonna work on reducing expenses for FY25, which is a lot of the larger bucket student supplies and office supplies and in areas where we know we have enough to be able to make do where we can make those cuts. And right now, if they do make the decision to cut, it's going to impact us about 1.5 million in revenues this year. So those are just definitely things that we need to be mindful of. Alexandra, would you like to add to anything?
Yeah, so let's just kind of do a pause. I think for context, we've got two different issues. We've got the fiscal year 25 budget, which is tied to the continuing resolution and the money for this year. And then we've got all these risks really for next year that are impacting Perry Street. For this year, as those of you who are living, breathing in the headlines know there's the continuing resolution today, that if the House passes, then seemingly there's no immediate impact. If the House chooses not to pass that resolution, that impact for Perry Street is about 1.5 million of potential lost revenue. We don't know that number for certain because the city, while if you read the headlines, has said that they would make reductions to potentially schools, police officers. That has not been settled or resolved. But given the school's rainy day fund or cash on hand, and given the current positive net impact, there's a way for the school to weather that storm, even if they were to really do a 1.5 reduction in revenue. So that's the immediate impact. We will have a better sense depending on what the House does today. So let me just pause there and let's talk about the today challenge, and then we can talk about the next year challenge.
Hey, just had a quick question in relation to cash on hand. Approximately how much? And I only asked that because I believe it was Rocket Ship, the school that had to shut down last year, and one of the requirements is that they had to have like 90 days of cash on hand. So I'm imagining we're somewhere past that.
Yeah, so you're referring to Eagle Academy.
Okay, I knew it was one of those.
I mean, pick a school, right? Pick a school. Right now, we're projecting the year to be at 155 days of cash on hand, so far above the 45-day requirement. So that is not a concern, if you will. We're also right now projecting about $700,000 in net income this year. So that would mean that our revenue exceeds our expenses by about 700,000. So that would be added into the cash. So that's where the school's been in a really good position that, if we needed to tap into this cash, and that equates to about 5.7 million in terms of actual cash by the end of the year, there's cash to tap into. That is, for those who've been on the board for a while, if you recall, the school used about $1.5 million in the last 3 years to do a lot of those building renovations. And that was a conscious investment by the school to redo the bathrooms, redo the playground. But it is also why you don't want to deplete all of your cash. And so that cash is there for those rainy days, but also for those long-term improvements. But this is a great example of why you want to have that cushion.
Thank you.
So I would say we've got the immediate problem. Maybe by the end of today, we'll have some clarity on that problem. The other is really thinking, as Portia alluded to, is the FY26 budget. It is not a normal budget planning cycle. Anyone who works in government or nonprofits or adjacent knows right now that the fiscal picture is very different. The mayor has come out and said that school funding will increase by 2.74% next year. For context, if you think about costs, we know that the costs of things like the school's PEPCO bill is going up far above 2.7%. The school's water bill has gone up far above 2.7 because the city has voted for rate increases in those two utilities. The tariffs have increased any kind of cost the school potentially may have. And so we know right now that that projected increase into schools budget is not enough to offset the cost increases. This is also the city will not increase the school's facility allotment, which for the last 3 years has been legislated and mandated to be increased. And we know that that will not happen because that legislation has expired. And so even if we were to hold all expenses flat, we know we would be incurring more expenses next year than that increase would cover. The city has also said that they agreed with the teachers union to a signed contract before the election. This is back in about October. That contract with the Washington Teachers Union is about a 7% salary increase. The mayor, when she released her initial spending plans for schools, said that they will fund that commitment to the Washington Teachers Union outside of school funding and typical per pupil. So what that would mean is that charters would not get the equivalent funding. And they said right now that they don't know how much they would give to charters, which Perry Street has in the past, in recent history, paid the same on the same scale as the Washington Teachers Union because the city has been generous with its funding. In this case, if the DC Public School Washington Teachers Union is getting a payment outside of the education payments to cover salaries, charter schools would not be able to match dollar for dollar. And there's just a lot of unknown with the federal government, quite frankly. As you've all probably read, the Department of Education is in a really precarious position right now. And so while Perry Street doesn't have any grants that are necessarily tied to the Department of Ed cuts that are happening, it's a lot of indirect grants. So if, teacher pipeline grants, for example, have been cut, literacy grants have been cut, all that impact Perry Street and all schools in some way. So it is, I would say the headline is it is not a normal budget cycle. We expect it to be a very tough budget cycle. We also expect this is next year will be the year we no longer have any ESSER funds. And so we're going to have to right size some staffing decisions that were grant funded positions where those grants, just the federal ESSER funds don't exist anymore. So let me do a big pause there and let, ask questions, discussions, confusions, and anyone has a magic 8 ball, we'll take it as well.
This is Andrew. We appreciate all the transparency here, and obviously, it's just been this crazy whirlwind. So we recognize that there's a lot of unknowns. Alexander, you mentioned having to right size some of the community in terms of staffing. Are we talking about a significant number, or just those who are sort of tied to federal funding that's not there anymore?
It's more those who are tied to federal funding who are not there anymore.
Okay, good.
I think the other thing, and to just Porsche, trying to remember where this is further on in the slides, but we can talk about it now as we were just talking about finances. Some of you may recall Perry Street has a bond. It's a quality school bond that was issued 14 years ago. That bond matures on May 1, 2026. It was a 15-year bond. This bond was incredibly advantageous to Perry Street. The interest rate on this bond has been less than 0%. And so because of that, one of the requirements of the bond is to do what's called arbitrage every 5 years, where you have to hire a firm who, this is a covenant of the bond, you have to basically assess how the school is doing with the bond and whether or not the school is on track to pay it off, and what the rates look like. We're in the 14th year of the bond right now. We just completed the arbitrage maybe a week ago. And the good news here is Perry Street has actually paid in more to the bond, and because of the interest rates, then the bond is due on May 1, 2026. So Perry Street is actually potentially making money off this bond. And so that may be close to almost $1 million that comes into Perry Street's advantage. So as we think about some of these challenges, one of the things that Porsche and I will be working on is to contact the bank to see what would an early payoff potentially be, because we could potentially tap into that cash early and terminate this bond. We're still paying into the sinking fund every single month. I think $68,000, Portia, if memory serves me correct. But basically, at this point, Perry Street is just paying into the sinking fund, even though the balance of the sinking fund now exceeds the bond amount due. These bonds are not, they don't exist anymore. So Perry Street got incredibly lucky at the time of getting this bond.
Is there a penalty for paying it early or paying out?
So there typically are some, those penalties were waived through December 2025 because of COVID. So that's one of the reasons why we want to, and that was part of the ARA ESSER, one of the federal legislation. So that is why if we were to pay it off early, like we could probably potentially tap into that option.
Yeah, it sounds like a no-brainer.
Now the bank could say no. That is their right, but I think it is worth exploring given the scenarios. I think in addition, as you kind of hear this budget conversation, this finance picture, I think what's important to also recognize is that all of this is happening to all schools in the district and nationally. All of these challenges are not just Perry Street challenges. They are truly challenges locally here for every charter school, but nationally for many schools, if not all schools. I think Perry Street is in a better position than many, as Brandon has alluded to, because not everybody is as fortunate to have kind of these cash cushions that exist.
Are there any questions, concerns, wonderings before I move on?
I don't think so.
All right, great. Okay, so let's move on to enrollment. So as you know, enrollment season is approaching and here and in full effect. Right now, our target enrollment is 438 students, which is lower than last year's enrollment. The applications were due on March 1st. So we received slightly below last year. Last year we received 250. This year is 203, with a slight increase in the top three, which is good. So I'm still looking at the applications and some are still rolling in little by little. We're also, targeting the families that are actually that have rated us like top choice or number one or number two, sending them little emails via MailChimp saying, hey, come to Perry Street. Here's what you're going to get when you get here. So hopefully those little pushes will also help for us to get more butts and seats for next enrollment year. Another thing that may help us but hurt the district is DC may end the Pre-K Enhancement and Expansion Act, which served 3 to 4-year-olds in private preschools, which was basically allowing them to attend. It was giving them a grant to attend for free. And it had over like 1,000 children in DC. So if that does end, then that means that we may have some more friends seeking charter enrollment in Pre-K 3 and Pre-K 4, which is where we want them to start. Because we want them to start there and just keep on going, keep on trucking all the way until 8th grade. So as you can see, the numbers for enrollment, the goal versus what we currently have, slightly different in some areas, but pretty much on par with what we currently have. Any questions about that?
I will just add, Portia, we don't know the impact of all of these federal changes on the local DC economy and families. We expect Perry Street saw an increase in ELL students as migrant students increased in the city. We don't expect that to continue given the current policies. We also believe that some families, and again, this is not just a Perry Street, there will be families who are leaving the district because of the current situation and the impacts on families. And so I think holding enrollment generally flat is probably the best case scenario right now. We should not expect a lot of new increases in enrollment, but happy to answer any questions or thoughts that people want to add here. I think we want to be conservative here, given the current situation. Rachel and Portia, are you hearing anything from families in terms of impacts on the federal government?
I have not.
I haven't either. I've
This
seen
is
maybe one family, which is like hard because they work in the kitchen, but I think they're moving back to Mexico right now. And I believe she has 2 kids, but right now that's pretty much the only.
Are we still seeing absenteeism due to the concern about, the immigration and the ICE changes to the administration and everything, or is that not as
No,
much
that
factor?
was temporary. That was we did a lot of outreach to those families. So what we did was I worked with the social worker and the APs were letting us know like if they saw our trends in any student absenteeism. And we called the families, like I called a couple families with Miss Lopes, our social worker, so she could translate. And a lot of the worry was that they thought that their information was going to be shared. It wasn't, it was at least 3 families that we spoke with, that was like the trend. They were worried that we were going to share information with people if they came in, and we told them that that wasn't going to happen. We reassured them that their kids are safe, so they started sending them.
That's good. Good to hear.
Any other questions about enrollment? All right. Compliance is pretty stacked as given the certain circumstances right now. Right now there are no new contracts. We did for innovation learning. I know I mentioned this at our last meeting that we had to put a pause on them because of the building and childcare certification. So we're working very diligently on trying to obtain that certification so that we can revisit innovation learning, because we really think that that's going to be a great program for families. And it will be able to provide subsidy if it still exists to families. So we're definitely I think we're like 90% there. So I will have hopefully better news at our next meeting. And again, no contracts. Right now, we did just submit our summer boost grant application, which is basically a summer version of the high impact tutoring grant, where we have to offer ELA and math tutoring during the summer months. So we'll hear back on that in April. So hopefully that's not impacted, but for the compliance and procurement, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, let me know. No? All right. Just for updates for the finance committee. So as Alexandra already explained to you earlier, our net income is positive, which is about 673 grand. It's 95,000 below the budget. So right now we're going to do more forecast adjustments for our February because the budget will close. We haven't done that in the finance committee yet, but we're just focusing on monitoring the sub coverage. And our food service fees, I'm working hard to get those down. I'm working really, really closely with the food service manager to determine where the discrepancies are and make sure that we are being charged for what we are using, but also we are also being reimbursed at the most we can be reimbursed. And just making sure our occupancy fees, as Alexandra mentioned, like Pepco bill has increased. And some of the like electricity, like all of those bills are increasing right now. So we're just working on monitoring that and making sure we're able to balance it out, which we are. So our FAR score is still projected to be 91 at the year end, which is well above the required 75, which is great. And as Alexandra mentioned, we're currently working on the FY26 budget. And we already explained to you about the bonds. So again, if you have any questions about that, let us know. All right. Easy group today. All right. So again, we're back on money, but the budget work has begun. Alexandra and I have been working with Rachel really, really diligently on making sure that we're looking at this closely and making sure no matter what is happening in this world outside, that our kids have what they need and we will flourish. So we're basically, as we mentioned, all COVID funding has ended. We are anticipating increased costs for salaries and facilities and resources. The U.S. UPSFF is expected to be a 2.74 increase. Our facilities allotment is remaining the same. The payments for teacher salaries are unknown right now. We have to figure out how to balance that out right now. So that's what we're doing. We anticipate 5%, about a 5% increase in costs with the tariff impact. As we mentioned, the enrollment is still remaining flat. For staffing, we're just going to realign things and make sure that any of those additional positions that we had due to COVID that just aren't necessary right now, we're working on figuring out where those are going to go and where they lie within our budget. And then our Eagle Bank sinking fund, as mentioned, ends in FY26. Our budget is due to July 1 to PCSB, so we have to make sure we're on top of that ASAP. So if anybody has questions about it, I know we just talked about it at length. So just if there were anything that you thought of in the meantime.
No questions, just really appreciate the thoroughness of you all, working collectively to kind of look at all facets of this and how best to mitigate some of the potential impacts on the budget. So I just really appreciate the effort that's been put into this, thinking through this FY26 budget. So thank you. And what you've shared with us.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. If there's no other questions for that, then we're going to move on to governance. Who's on governance? Alexandra, do you want to speak on governance, or do you
I
want?
think Sydney's not with us, but I think the emphasis for the governance committee is going to be to recruit new trustees for the upcoming school year because we are going to have some shifts and departures. And so if you know anybody, have a friend, definitely would welcome any recommendations. We find that our personal work networks are often the best source of trustees. And so would love to have folks send recommendations to Sydney for that.
Academics committee.
Rachel, you guys met, I think, to go over the winter map data.
Yes, we did. And so not only did we go over the winter map data, but shortly after we had a board meeting, we were able to do a building wall for all of the teachers who did exceptional on map. So we have new data coming out in the upcoming weeks for map that we're going to present at the next board meeting. But we were trending for math and ELA. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. We did well in math the last go round and we showed significant growth in math and ELA. That's why this go round, we are hoping that we are going to do actually even better than we did before because we're preparing for CAPE. So that's another thing. CAPE is coming up too. So that is going to be coming down the pipeline. The kids are taking quite a few tests at the end of the school year. We're preparing for CAPE. But while we're preparing for CAPE, we're also preparing for MAP in hopes that will also prepare us for CAPE. So that, as it relates to the academics, those are the two things we're looking forward to and the two things we are working towards right now.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that for Rachel? All righty. Well, that is it for today. Does anybody have any overall questions, wonderings, comments, concerns?
I do have a quick question. I know that we're kind of all in limbo everywhere with how the administration is playing out right now. If and when we do see an increase in enrollment, hopefully, will that increase staffing numbers? Would we be able to fund that? Have we thought that far? Are we still kind of on a hope and a prayer? Um, I'm just wondering. And I know most of us don't know anything right now. It's literally day by day.
Uh, for, from an operational standpoint, I believe that we usually try and make it work with what, what staffing we have, depending on the student enrollment and the student need. Um, Unfortunately, when we do get the payment for the students, most of the times it doesn't cover all of their needs. So we work really hard to keep the staffing at what we have to make sure that we're able to move people around. I mean, if we do see an influx of like over 150 kids or something crazy, of course, we'll definitely change our staffing ratios and move things around. But Rachel, do you have anything to add to that, or does that sound on brand?
Yeah, that pretty much sounds on brand.
Okay. Well, I hope we get that 150 influx.
Me too. We're working hard to figure it out. We're definitely doing the outreach. We need to know that. We need these families to know that this is a great neighborhood school for their kids. Any other questions? No? Okay. Alexandra, you there?
Yep. So it is 9:14. So I think we are going to go ahead and see if there's a motion to adjourn the meeting. Obviously, if any folks have any questions, this is very much a day-by-day situation when it comes to the budget finance. And so we will be waiting to see what happens today with the continuing resolution. But feel free to reach out to Portia, Rachel, or myself. It is definitely an evolving and changing situation, as Sean mentioned. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Andrew. Is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Hassan. And again, we need to do a roll call vote because we are online. So Hassan,
Here.
Shannon,
Here.
Brandon,
Here.
Andrew,
Aye.
Shannon, I'm sorry, Kelly,
Here.
and Sean.
Here.
All right, so the meeting is adjourned at 9:15. Thank you all for joining us. And you can go ahead and stop recording, Portia.
Got it. Done.